Well, tonight, as we enter the third week of the Leongatha Mushroom murder trial, here's a look at the explosive details we have heard to date and just what more we can expect.
Erin Patterson stands accused of murdering her estranged husband's parents, Don and Gail Patterson, and his auntie, Heather Wilkinson, and attempting to murder Heather's husband, Ian. While the defence argues Erin
did not deliberately serve poisoned food to her guests.
We've heard from several key witnesses in the first 2 weeks of the trial, including family, hospital staff and the only surviving guest, Ian Wilkinson. Based on Ian's testimony, Erin had unexpectedly invited the group for lunch, where they discussed her recent cancer diagnosis. However, the defence conceded she lied about the diagnosis. Ian also told the court Erin refused help plating the meals and was hesitant to show guests her pantry, that she served her guests on grey plates while hers was an orange tan colour.
Erin picked up the odd plate and placed it on the table. She took it to her place on the table.
The children of the deceased were emotional as they described their parents' final hours in hospital, having presented there the morning after the lunch. At that time, Erin had not yet sought medical help. Testimony from Ian and Heather's daughter Ruth highlighted her parents' surprise.
They talked about their concern for Erin maybe coming to hospital as a precaution. They felt she should be there also.
Erin admitted herself the following day, but despite doctors' warning she may need a liver transplant, discharged herself from hospital against advice.
Her life was at risk. These guys were really unwell.
As the lunch guests fought for their lives, Don and Gail's son Matthew called Erin, desperate for answers about what might have made them so sick.
She mentioned there were fresh mushrooms from Woolies and there were dried mushrooms from a Chinese grocer or supermarket. I had toxicology people who were with us who wanted to know.
Testimony from Simon claiming that as his relatives lay in hospital, Erin never once asked how they were.
It intrigues me that she didn't actually ask.
Just 6 days after the fatal lunch, Heather and Gail died while Don passed away the following day. After almost 2 months in hospital, Ian recovered. Erin Patterson has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
Rachael Brown is an investigative journalist at the ABC who is working on the ABC podcast Mushroom Case Daily, getting about 200,000 downloads a day. You've been in court every day, face-to-face really, with Erin. How has she seemed?
Well, she actually sits behind me. She's in the dock at the back of everyone. So I've tried not to look around too much because a lot of people are doing it. I understand the need to for daily reporting, but I would feel like a zoo exhibit myself if everyone was watching every move and did she flinch, did she smile? So the only smile that I've seen is when she was watching a video of her son playing with his granddad, who's one of the people, Don, who passed away from that lunch, and they were making a rocket-propelled car in the backyard, and she smiled at that, and that must have been a really nice moment for her. But most of the time, as you're watching now, it's just a face of pain, you know, and I think that the starkest moment I saw was when her daughter, the evidence of her daughter was played talking to a police detective, and she was this tiny little 9-year-old that was being swallowed up by this green chair, and her pink trainers are just dangling over the edge because her legs don't even touch the ground. Wow. And that was the hardest day, I think, for everybody in the courtroom because so vulnerable, tiny little voice, you know, and she was speaking about playing Monopoly that weekend, and I just thought that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be here answering questions about a triple murder.
Yeah. So we've heard from Erin's family and friends. Are we likely to hear from Erin herself?
I don't know yet, sincerely. So the onus is on the prosecution to prove its case. The defence doesn't have to put up any witnesses. It doesn't have to put Erin in the stand. That's her decision. So I don't know whether she'll decide to do that. If she doesn't, that's no adverse inferences would be drawn there. But we just don't know. So we've got maybe a couple more weeks, if that, of prosecution witnesses, and then we get into the defence witnesses if there are any.
Something that is not part of the prosecution's case, at least so far, is motive, which is really interesting. They have not tried to identify one. There doesn't seem to be an argument about one. How is that going to affect the trial?
I found that really interesting too, and you don't need motive to prove murder, and the prosecution has said we're not even going to offer one up. But often it's helpful to inform intent. And you do need to prove intent beyond reasonable doubt to prove murder. So 12 jurors will have to unanimously agree, beyond reasonable doubt, that she deliberately poisoned her in-laws. And they'll have to do this after the bulk of the evidence so far, and there will be more. But the bulk of the evidence has been that she loved them, that she loved her in-laws. We have heard some texts that she was frustrated at them trying to get involved, in the to do with school fees and things like that. But most of the evidence is she loved them. So intent is something that's going to be a big issue at this trial. The prosecution, of course, is alleging she did intend to kill them, and it says that she did incriminating things after the lunch, like dumped the dehydrator at a tip and lied to police. The defence, however, says it was a terrible accident, that it was a tragedy. And Colin Mandy, her defence barrister, Colin Mandy, SC, put an interesting question to the jury. He said, could she have panicked? If you've cooked a meal and 3 people end up dead, might you behave in a way that's a bit odd? Might you lie? Might you panic?
It's all part of the intrigue.
People might not know, but there's a ballot, isn't there, to get a seat in the court, Rachel, every day?
There is.
6 people only. I mean, how do you feel when you're waiting to know whether your name's called out or not?
Well, we have got a seat for some of the days, but often we thought that there'd be a lot more general public, and maybe after this there will be, but I've managed to snare a seat on a side bench when I've missed out on a media seat, so I've been there for most days to see the gravity of what's going on in there. And it has been, like I said, it's been really intense. And in the public, I listen to things, like jokes about mushrooms and memes on Instagram. So I guess I'd just like people to remember that 3 people have died and, communities are grieving and a whole family has been demolished.
Yeah, there's the intrigue and then there's the seriousness of the situation that sparked it. So good to speak to you. Would you please thank Rachel for being here?
Thank you.